Welcome to this episode's Brain Pick a Pro show. Guys, I got to tell you, I am so excited today. This is going to be a little bit different. Normally we have somebody Skyped in, maybe somebody on my team or one of my friends or whatever. But I have the man, the legend, and the myth here. This is you guys call me a guru. This is my guru. This is the guru's guru, the mentor. I am so excited today. I call him Dad. This is my father-in-law. Many of you know a little bit about my backstory about my first wife passed away from breast cancer when she was 31 years old, when my daughter was 4 years old. And we're still very close and do a lot of business together. And he's up here visiting from Florida. So I asked him while he was here, I said, would you let me interview you? Because I know you guys have heard me talk about him in my books and, mention some Andyisms all the time. So please give a warm welcome, Andy Laikin. Thanks for being on.
My pleasure, Larry.
That's awesome. I'm so excited. Why don't you, let's start out and tell everybody a little bit about your background.
Well, I was raised in Florida, primarily in Miami. And I went to I was in the Army. And after I got out of the Army, I wanted to get started in real estate. So my first job was as an apartment manager. Now, I was only 23 years old, 24 years old.
You got a late start.
Well, the Army slowed me down. But it was a 400 unit apartment complex on Kendall Drive, which was one of the main streets in Miami. And the owners were just having a heck of a time. So they said, okay, we'll take a shot with you. And I turned it around for them and they were very pleased. But, I was looking for something more. And while I was working there, I was, trying to do deals or at least try to make something happen. And during that, I went to see a real estate broker, and her name was Jonelle, and she was a commercial broker. She really was good at it. But her secretary at the time was her daughter, who was right there at the office. And I met her, and her name was Lynn. And so I asked her out, and eventually we were married. And Jonelle, who was still in real estate, was always there and was always giving me advice if I needed some. About this time, we decided, meaning Lynn and I decided to move to Melbourne, which is, halfway between Jacksonville and Miami.
Yeah, it's near Patrick Air Force Base?
Yes, yes, and it's right across from Orlando, but it's on the ocean. And the reason I had gone up there was that over, trying to get into real estate, we had bought a couple of parcels of land, and we were thinking, well, we would develop them or do something. And both of the pieces were commercial. One thing that I did, I should really tell you this, is that one of the parcels, which was a shopping center site.
Right.
Now this is back in the 70s, but we bought it for $250,000. The same day we bought it, we sold it for $525,000.
The same day.
It's known as a simultaneous close.
Wow. Now that's real estate day trading on a large scale, right?
Yeah. And since we were able to sell it right there, we used some of the funds that we received to buy the other piece of property, which was a 14-acre multifamily piece of property.
Yeah.
And back then, the real estate was so down back then, the terms were, I think we put one piece, now this was 14 acres, so 35 units to the acre. We put 10% down. We got interest only for 3 years.
Wow.
We didn't have to make any principal payments. And then after that, I think it was a 5-year term.
Right.
So anyway, during the course of, I don't know, we owned it probably for 2 or 3 years. We wound up selling it for $800,000.
Wow. So you parlayed the 2 into 5 into 8.
Yes.
Now the $200,000 deal that you did to simultaneous closing, that was your first deal?
Well, it was my first big deal in the sense that, even, maybe it's better, it's like, if you don't know, you can't do something. Do it anyway, because my mother-in-law, who'd been in real estate for 50 years.
Joe Nell.
And
she was a sweetheart. I loved her.
Oh, yeah.
She was, this woman, I got to tell you, you remember her, how she was. She was so flamboyant and so, expressive. I mean, you used to tell people, instead of going on vacation, you'd rather send her and have her come back and tell you about it.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, she was, she had so many watches. She'd wear a watch that matched her outfit every day. So that's how she was. But she was good at what she did. She was really good, especially for being a woman, in the commercial side. She didn't do residential, just commercial.
Yeah, in that day and time. Yeah.
But, I was crazy, I guess, because, I was coming up with these deals and she was looking at me with her mouth, can we really do this? And we did, but it was sort of like the stepping stone onto the next step because, land is one of my favorite investments because, if you buy it right, you sell it right. And that's an Andyism too. You make your deal when you buy it, because if you buy it right, you're going to be able to sell it.
Now, you've told me your formula many times.
On land?
Yeah, on land. Tell everybody your formula.
Well, my formula for land is the land's got to be worth twice as much as I'm paying for it. Now, that doesn't mean when I sign the contract it is, but usually that's what I would want. It could mean that, there was this piece of property that I could put a contract in on subject to getting it rezoned to, say, multifamily or commercial,
right? Which
would then increase the value. So, but usually, because that's a lot of work and it depends on the market. I mean, I don't buy in, say, a hot market. I'm kind of looking for when the market gets a little down or people are looking to sell. And when I was developing, yes, I would, buy property like this and then have it rezoned and that would make it happen.
That builds the value.
That builds the value. And in the beginning, I would, go ahead and develop it. In the end, I would say I was going to develop it, but then I'd wind up selling it to somebody else.
Yeah, because in other words, you put the package together. So here's a ready to develop piece of property, right? Isn't that what you did?
Well, after I was developing per se, but I guess what I'm saying there is that, and maybe it's because the projects were so large, but it was fun and I made money. But, the development part, you got to deal with, subs and, it's so sometimes it was just easier for me just to.
It's a job.
Yeah. Oh, it's more than a job. And yes, when I was actually building things, I had when I say a general contractor, he worked for me.
Right.
But I had a general contractor, a secretary, and a salesman. And everybody else were subs, my contractor, and we'd build a project. My salesman would sell it. Sometimes Joe Nell would help. And usually they were successful. So when we got to Melbourne, I still needed a job. So now this was when the real estate market was down so bad you had to look up to look down. This was when, I used to this was before Reagan in the 70s, but there was a lot of problems in the early 70s. So when I got to Melbourne, I saw an ad in the paper. They wanted a condominium salesman for this project called the 19th Hole, which was on a city golf course. It was 72 units that were almost completed. There was some work still to be done. And the guy that did it was doing it. He worked for Tennessee Bank, who owned the property now. And he was a developer, a real developer from Denver who, lost everything and was now really an indentured servant to First Tennessee because he owed them so much money.
Right.
So they said, we want you to go down to Florida and sell this project. And his name was Joe. And he was really a wild But so anyway, I came in to interview, and he gave me the, he said, I'll give you a try, Uh, so like I said, so we had made a deal on the commissions, and the deal was that on a monthly basis. And now the units were back then. Now these were nice 2-bedroom, 1 bath, 2-bedroom, 2 bath condos.
Right.
And we were selling them for like between 25.9 and 31.9. So he tells me, okay, here's how we'll do it on a monthly basis. The first one you sell, you get 400. Second one you sell, you get 500. Third, 6, up to 1,000. And then after that, it's just 1,000 every unit.
Right.
So I said, okay. So we finally got it all finished. So the first month I sold 42 units.
42 units?
We had a heart attack.
The first two. Yeah, he was wanting to renegotiate.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they did. I wouldn't let him. I said, what do you mean? This was our deal. And so he stuck by it,
right.
In all fairness. And when I say he, it was really the bank. I mean, they
right.
were paying everybody. They were paying him. But so, and then, the next month I sold the rest, the other 30. But
so then you were out of a job again.
Well, no, because
but you had $70,000.
Right. But also, I realized that Joe really knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And so at that time we realized that we found 2 other pieces on that same golf course.
Right.
So
is this the Joe I know?
No.
Oh, okay.
His name, no, it's not we'll call him Joe A. So we wound up, and he was, like I said, he was experienced. So we wound up buying 2 other pieces on that golf course, which would give us another like 125 units. And at the same, because this is the time when there were REITs and these mortgage REITs, and they all collapsed. So there was one REIT in Atlanta called Great American, and they had this parcel on the ocean in Melbourne Beach, and it was 1,650 feet of oceanfront.
Wow!
And it was already site planned for 96 units. There would be 8 buildings of 12 units each, and they actually had the foundations in on 4 of them.
Right.
So, I was just a young kid back then, but he and I, we went up to Atlanta. We negotiated with them, and because we sold this so fast and the real estate market was turning around, we developed a relationship, which was more me because I just happened to know them, with a local savings and loan, and they saw what we were doing and they felt pretty confident, and so they loaned us the money to do the first deal was 32 units on the golf course. And then we closed the loan on a Friday. We sold out on a Saturday. We were taking a waiting list on Sunday.
Like reservations.
Yeah.
Because you hadn't even built it yet, right?
Well, when I say sold out, no, right. But we were writing contracts.
Yeah, yeah.
But we couldn't close them until we, of course, built it. But anyway, we were sold out when we started construction on it. And then there was another piece of land which was for 100 units. That it was like an island. In other words, every unit would have a golf course view because it was completely on the golf course. So anyway, we started that one, and we were still, working on the breakers. Well, so about this time now, during that time also, because I guess we were good at it, the bank was having us go up to Tennessee. We did 2 jobs in Memphis.
You were their bailout guys.
Oh yeah, we would go in and hire everybody and do a couple of models, and this might be 100, 200 up the project, and now it wouldn't sell out like it did, but we would actually get them out of trouble.
Right. And
so when we go to Memphis, we wind up on the top floor where the chairman of the board was, and everybody was bowing down. So, but Joe was a little too crazy for Melbourne in the sense that he drank a lot. He had a mistress that he would take to meetings. And
oh, wow.
That wasn't going over good. So finally one day he and I sat down and I said, look, Joe, why don't we split up? said, I'll give you, which Fairways for was the 100 units that was already halfway done.
Right.
And the sales were good. I'll give you Fairways for. And we had another piece of land that he bought me out of, which was fine. I'll give you Fairways for, and I'll take the breakers, which really hadn't even started construction yet or anything. I was still. So eventually he agreed, and I.
Now the breakers, that's the Oceanfront property.
Yes, the breakers was the 1,600.
I remember that. Spent many a night there.
Yeah.
One of the units. Yeah.
So there was, in a way I was free of Joe, and I'm not saying that like he was terrible. I'm just saying it that we weren't that compatible, or, I just, it wasn't good with the mistress and everything else. So
right.
He wasn't helping that much. So, I got, now, all right. So now this is 196 units on the ocean. So I got Joe Nell involved, and, they required a pre-sale requirement, which we made. So we did the first phase was 48 units.
Uh-huh.
And the other problem was, so when they were building it the first time, they were going to build us out of wood, and
it's on the ocean.
Wait, but no, forget, all the units had at least one fireplace. A couple of them had two fireplaces. So I said, no, I'm not. So I had to redid the plans where, everything was concrete. The floors were poured concrete, right, and the walls and everything. So, I felt a lot better about that. But anyway, and the units were really nice. I mean, we're talking, we're not talking 1,200 square foot boxes. We're talking, like there was a townhouse unit with 2 fireplaces. The master bedroom took the whole top floor.
Yeah.
We're talking, anywhere from 2,300 to 2,500 square feet. Different units. So it was a class project. So, and I had Joe Nell in my corner there helping me sell. And then I, of course, hired a salesman. And on this project, the bank, of course, wouldn't let me to build it because, I was still pretty young. So they made me hire a general contractor, bonded which I was glad I did. And they were the contractor. And so we started building. And the Breakers was a very successful project. We pretty much sold out before. And I know one of your questions was, well, what's the best deal as far as making money was? And I would say probably the Breakers. I probably made about, we're talking condos, 100 condos. And, I probably made a couple of $1 million on the deal. At the same time, and maybe I'm going on too long.
No, that's great. Right. That's great. I love it.
So at the same time, I had found, one of my engineers called me up one day and he said, Andy, I got this 850-foot project on the ocean. It's all townhouses, it's 32 townhouses. And I got these 2 crazy Cubans from Miami and they're fighting and they want out of the deal. So I wrote a contract for that. Now I think, I paid, and this is important, these numbers now, because I paid $525,000 for the property
to buy them out.
Well, I didn't, but part of that $25,000 was the commission to the engineer who got me the deal,
right,
which was only fair. So, but it was done in phases. So, like I said, there were 32 townhouses, so there were 4 buildings of 8 units each.
Right.
And so I was able to even negotiate where I gave them a down payment. I think it was like $150,000. And this is if you're a developer doing it. So for that $150,000, I got them to release the first phase so that I could get a mortgage and build it.
So explain what the release is, just so everybody
sure.
Knows.
So, it was already a site plan. The site plan had already been done and approved. I was just buying the whole package. So, the first building, if you divide 850 by 4, so the first building was about 210 feet or whatever. So when I gave them the money, they actually, now, of course, they had the mortgage, but because of the $150,000, they released me free and clear from the mortgage the first phase. And then, for example, so when I finished that phase, I would give them, say, another 125,000, and they would release the second phase. And normally these are done like at 110 or 120% more even of say the whole value. So for example, if the whole piece was 5.25, so that would mean in round numbers, let's say that about 100, each phase is about 135,000. So now I guess I was at 110, but so at 120%, so you'd pay 135 down plus another, say, 25. So for $160,000, they feel comfortable because they still have the rest of the land under the mortgage, but yet you're able to start your development.
Right. You're paying them a little bit ahead. They're going to get paid off in full before the whole thing is done.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Plus you're able to release that parcel so you can go to the bank and get a mortgage to build the building.
Exactly. Right. So I went and got a construction loan. And we started the first phase. These were really nice towns. Nobody's ever seen these.
Now, what was it called?
Las Brisas.
Las Brisas.
The Breezes.
Yeah.
And these were really nice. So they had a garage in the front. You need a garage on the ocean, or else your car rusts out in 3 months or 3 years. But anyway, so it had a garage in the front. And then it had like this patio that before you walk into the townhouse. And what we did there was we put in these huge jacuzzi tubs, and it was that nice a patio. And then you'd go into the unit. Now the units were 3 stories.
Is that where Jonelle lived?
No.
That wasn't where she lived.
No, we lived there for a while when we came back from North Carolina, and the unit I had kept.
Yeah.
But these were all like California style. All the ceilings were cedar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were really nice. But so we started the first phase. But, we're talking oceanfront here. And the property was actually zoned, even though they had only did a site plan for 32 units. The property was actually zoned for 76 units. So now we finished the first phase and we're starting the second. So I go down to the planning and zoning. They all love me down there for some reason. Because I always did what I said I was going to do. So, I never jerked them around.
That's very important.
Well, yeah, and not that Joe did either, but that's part of my reputation, and I try to keep that. And this was in the county as opposed to, say, one of the cities, which the county's always easy to work with because they're more professional. So I walked in one day and I said to Bill, who was the head of planning and zoning, I said, "Hey, Bill, I got this piece of property here. It's, I'm putting up these townhouses, but it's zoned for 76 units. Could I change the last 2 buildings into condos?" "Sure." So while I was doing the second phase of the townhouses, we redid the we redid the last 2 buildings, and we converted them into 2 30-unit condominiums.
Wow.
I think it was 5-6 stories. I don't know. And they were not, and that was my business. I really specialized on the ocean back then. So I finally got everything done as far as it took it took a little while, but that's normal when you're developing, especially on the ocean. It's even worse because they have so many more restrictions. So we went ahead and got the site plan approved, and the market was starting to turn. It had been very good for quite a while. So I started, advertising the 60 units, and this broker calls me one day, and he says, "I've got somebody in Monte Carlo that's looking for an oceanfront deal." I said, "Well, I got these 60 units." So now back then, the price, let's say, for oceanfront, and they didn't sell it by the foot back then. They sold it by the unit. In other words, if it, how many units could you put on it?
even the land price was based on how many units you could get.
That's
around.
what I'm saying. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, normally Oceanfront would sell by the front foot. There's a whole lot of
Like
ways.
road frontage or something. in
Yeah,
commercial.
yeah. So, and not like I said, this was 850 feet. So now don't forget, I've used 425 of those to build the two buildings.
Right.
So now I've only got half of it left. Now I paid $5.25 for the whole thing. So the 60 units, the market value, or what they're selling for then, was $20,000 a unit, which would be $1,200,000
Just for the land that's left.
just for the land, and of course
Yeah.
the package.
Right.
You know, meaning
The approved package.
Yeah.
Ready to build.
And so this guy, these brokers show up, and we write a contract. I wanted $1.2 million net. We wrote a contract for, I think, $1,350,000 cash.
$1,350,000 cash.
Cash. So, and which they should have, but I jumped through 18,000 hoops to make it happen. In other words, they wanted to make sure that they could build the project and everything was okay,
Right.
and eventually, we closed. So that was probably the best deal I ever did, because if you think about it, so what I did was I bought a piece of land for $525. Let's say I used half of it, so so that was $250, and then I sold the other half, which I had $250 left in, for $1.2 million.
So you made $1 million on the land, plus all the money you made on the townhouses.
Well, I made $1 million on the land, and I made some money on the townhouse.
Okay.
Right? But but it was, and I kept the townhouse even, that we used and all. But
Right.
and then I eventually sold that, of course. But that would probably be, when I say my most profitable deal on a percentage basis. There's no doubt about it. My attorney couldn't believe it. He was so, and he was a real estate attorney. So, but anyway, so those were, and these were early in my career. I was 32 when I
Wow.
did the breakers.
Yeah.
When I finished the breakers.
Wow.
So
You were young doing big projects like that. That's
well, I
awesome.
didn't know, nobody ever told me I couldn't. So
Yeah, and you started out big. You started out big. You didn't start out in single family houses and stuff like that. You started out big.
Well, I tried to explain that to my mother one time. She said to me one day, she says, the problem with you is you always want to start at the top. And I tried to explain to her, well, the higher you start at, the less you have to go to get to the top. So anyway, but so those were probably, back then, my two, doing developing, but developing kind of lost its allure for me. And then I really would start, I was buying like mini storages or land and speculating and stuff like that.
I remember years ago about you buying a mini storage and then working it for a while and then turn around and selling it. You
Sure.
even had there was some office condos or something there with it you had and sold.
Well, with the
You got a lot of war stories.
yeah, well, the mini storage was interesting only because, it's in whatever endeavor you are in real estate, you're always looking for the boni, or that's what I call it, or the bonus. I'm always, for example, on the ocean, 850 feet of oceanfront. Well, when I bought it, I knew it was zoned for 76 units. To me, that was a bonus.
Right, right.
I wasn't paying for it, but yet it could happen if I wanted to make it happen. And so when I do a deal, I always try to look for, like maybe not an edge against the seller per se, but maybe he doesn't realize something that I do.
Some kind of way to increase the value.
Exactly. And, very rarely will I tell them, unless, of course, I'm not interested at all. And then I would tell them.
Right.
But so anyway, what was nice about the mini storage was, it was on the ocean. First of all, you couldn't get a mini storage, on the ocean. Meaning, when I say on the ocean, in Melbourne, there's the mainland, and then there's the island, which, where the rich people live, let's say. But what I'm getting at is that they wouldn't allow like minis, but sure enough, they built this one within a warehouse. So I bought it, and I got a real good price on it. It was owned by a dentist that was, thought he was in real estate, but really didn't know what he was doing. So what was nice about that was this, it turned out it happened, or I had owned the unit, I had owned the building when Hurricane Andrew hit Miami.
Right.
And it actually wiped out Homestead Air Force Base. In fact, they never rebuilt it. But just down the street from where my mini storage was Patrick Air Force Base. And they were getting all the people coming up. So what happened was the federal government, any unit I had empty at the mini storage, they rented.
They would take it.
Yeah, and they'd send me, a huge check every month because, and I was full for like a year,
Wow.
So eventually, so that deal, I bought it for $450, and probably 2 years later, I sold it for $750.
$450 to $750.
Yeah, and I don't remember. I think I might have even held the mortgage for a while with him.
Right.
I can't remember. I don't remember anymore. But and then I lived in the Carolinas for a while. We were I bought a strip center up in Denver,
North
Carolina, and because we lived up that way, and then one of the local people had developed a subdivision, and so I bought it from him, and then we started building houses. Now this was with the other Joe. Joe, he moved to North Carolina too, and so he'd come to where we live for the week, right, working.
The Joe I know.
Yeah, and then go home for the weekends.
Yeah.
In fact, I bought a townhouse project so he and my son could live there during the week.
That's funny. I'm going to buy a townhouse project to give my son.
Yeah. Well, Joe was mad because David kept drinking all his beer. But anyway, North Carolina was good. But, I really, wanted to go back to Florida. So we were up here for about, 3 years, 4 years.
Well, you were planning on moving back whenever I met Dawn, right?
That's right.
In fact, you had already rented her an apartment and got her a job in Florida when we met.
In North Carolina.
No, she was ready to move back to Florida like the following week or two.
Oh, but anyway, so what happened is I wound up getting.
And then I threw a wrench in that.
Well, I wound up getting her a job at NCNB.
Yeah, eventually. Yeah, that's right.
And she stayed up here, and we moved back.
Yeah, and
the rest is history,
right,
as it goes with Larry. But anyway, that's after that. I would do deals, but I'm very selective. And, some people think I'm a wild man, but actually I'm very conservative.
And you've got a saying about the quantity versus the quality.
Well, if you're doing
that's what you've always told me.
Well, if you're doing hard money loans, I understand that a hard money loan means that you're looking at the asset, but you don't really want the grief of, having a foreclosed, blah, blah, blah. Right. So my saying there is to me, quality is more important than quantity. I'd rather do a smaller loan where I know I'm safe or, I've got the right LTV, right, than to step out for no reason, even though, you're going to get the asset. Well, I got to sell it. I got to foreclose.
It's a pain.
It's a pain where actually it's so much better or so much easier when you just make whatever the interest rate or whatever the deal was to its conclusion. So, I'm a big believer in that.
And we've done a lot of hard money loans together over the years.
Yes, absolutely. A lot. And the other thing is, and Larry, another Andyism, so to speak, as Larry calls them, is trees don't grow to the sky. And what that means, now that's really more of a stock market saying. But what it means is that, you're going to have a correction, whether it's in real estate, whether it's in the stock market, things turn around. Sometimes they turn around so quick you don't even realize it. So you always have to, be aware of that. But, there's also when things are bad, to me, that's where the opportunities really are. At one time I would tell people, well, I'm really the undertaker. In other words, the deals are going to be so down before I even get interested. And, it doesn't happen, who knows when it happens, but usually the cycles run, 7-10 years, from the up to the down between the interest rates starting to rise and then they get too high. Even when I did the breakers, which was, not really the breakers west, which was, so when I bought the breakers, that 1,650 feet of property, the boni on that deal was that across the street, A1A is the main drag for the ocean. Across the street, there was another, I don't remember how many acres, but enough for another 44 condos.
Right.
Now, these didn't have an ocean view. They had a view of the condos that had the ocean view. But the point, and you couldn't sell them for hundreds of thousands. So anyway, after we finished the breakers, I did a site plan. We did, it was, I think, 43 units with a garage, and they were nice units. They were not as big as the ones at the breakers. They were about 1,400 square feet.
Right.
So, but now the market was turning around, and things were getting bad. Now, at the same time I was doing that, I was doing another 24-unit oceanfront project. Now, the difference is that the ocean is more like an insurance policy because everybody wants to live on the ocean.
Right.
It's not so, even though the prices are less, not so with say units that aren't on the ocean. So, and plus, because they thought I could do no wrong, I just decided how much they should sell for, which was like 80,000, where really the market was more like 65. And so I did my loan with the bank based on 80,000. So in actuality, I made $800,000 when I built it. So, but unfortunately, after I built it, couldn't sell them. And so what happened was we sold, I'd say, half of them. And the market, now this was when Reagan became president. So back then interest rates were up in the 16, 15, 16.
The high teens.
Yeah. So, and in fact, so what I was, and I knew I was in trouble. So what I started doing was I was starting to go, because South Florida was even worse, or the West Coast. I mean, it was everywhere, especially in Florida. So, and to the point where they started to hold auctions. They would auction off projects, so I started going to some of these auctions.
This was along the RTC time, Resolution Trust.
No, that was later.
Or was that later?
Well, the RTC, I forgot. That's a good story too. But anyway, so what was I saying?
About the condos, the market turning.
Okay, so the market was turning. So I started going to these auctions and watching these auctioneers, and they'd have maybe a 40-unit project, and they bang it down in half an hour, but the prices were low. So I knew I had to do something. So I went to the savings and loan. So I had, like I said, I had about 22 units left. So I told them, look, why don't we do this? And I guess I owed about $1.1 million on the deal, maybe a little more, because I know I gave them some cash too. So I said, let's put a $50,000. It wasn't that 11 3/4. That was what the rate. I mean, that was under. That was under. I mean, the rate was more.
They were giving you a good rate.
I told them they had to, or they were going to.
Or they can have it back.
I would never be that way with them, because they were always very good to me. Right. But they got the message. They would work with me too. So I said, look, let's put $50,000 mortgages on each unit, and we'll make them one-time assumable so that, I can sell them, with the mortgage intact. And then what I did was, because I couldn't sell them, I started renting the units out. So I was renting them for about $5.25 or something. And it was enough to pay the $50,000. I was still going down in the hole, but it was, at least I was, in this market, I was doing good.
Yeah.
But I knew that I had to do something. So I approached an auctioneer. His name was Jim Gall. His license number in the state of Florida is 1. Okay. Honestly. So I negotiated with him, oh yeah, we want 6%. I'm looking at this guy and I'm saying, because I'd already been to quite a few auctions, I'm saying to myself, this guy wants 6%. And
in this market.
No, but he's going to work for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
These things turned out,
Right.
So I said, look, I'm a broker too. So why don't we do this? I know normally if we did a co-broker, it'd be 3%. I'm willing to give you 2% and pay all the advertising and everything, which was probably a couple $1,000. They do these flyers and all.
Right.
So we agreed. And I had Emerson, who was my salesman there. So we actually, we advertised that there's going to be this auction, and he was there every day and he showed people, we had a
financing
model.
Available and all that.
Oh yeah, financing available, $7,500 down. So everybody knew exactly what they had to bring. It wasn't like, you bring $7,500, you give it to us. There's no qualifying. The $7,500 was your qualifying.
Right.
So I didn't know how it was going to go. I was nervous, so the day of the auction, and they put up this huge tent. They had a Dixieland band. I mean, he did it right. Okay. And lo and behold, a couple of hundred people showed up. I mean, there was,
wow.
This was a big tent, and they were outside the tent and one reason is that nobody had ever done an auction of real estate in Melbourne.
Really?
Yeah.
Nobody had ever auctioned real estate in Melbourne.
No. So
wow.
This was the first one. So anyway, to make a long story short, we sold every unit. The first unit banged down for $77,000, but he chickened out, so I had to put it back into the pool. But the next one was 70. So how it works is that the bidding starts. Okay, so when the high bidder, now like I said, I had 22 units. The high bidder gets his choice of whatever unit he wants.
Right.
Or how many he wants.
Right.
And so he gets his pick, and then they'll say, all right, anybody else want a unit at this price?
Right. So the
now
high bidder determined the price and which unit, and then anybody else after he gets first pick.
Exactly.
Anybody else.
So except nobody else picked, So and then okay, we do it again. So then a unit banged out for 76, 75, maybe 72. So here we are. I probably got 6 left, and the bidding ends at 65. And so the guy picks his unit, and then he says, if anybody else wants a unit at 65, now's your time. And there was like a mass rush to the state. I could have sold another 10 units if I had them.
Wow.
And at least I got some cash. I got $7,500 a unit.
Right. And they could assume the loan.
They assumed the $50,000 loan. And then what I did, because they, it was more than the 50. So on most of them, I think only 2 of them wouldn't do this, which was all right. But on most of them, I just wrapped it. Now I didn't increase. I was glad they were paying 11 3/4. So I could, I didn't increase the wrap. So I would wrap the loans with, at 11 3/4 and give them the amount, and then they would pay me, and then I would pay the bank.
Right.
But 2 of them were nervous. Oh yeah, what if he doesn't pay them, or meaning the bank? So with them, which was fine, I took a second.
You just took a second mortgage.
Right.
And they made 2 payments, one to you and one to the bank.
Which either way was fine with me. But the bottom line was, I got out of the deal. and I had still most of my skin, but I guess lose money on the deal as far as when I sold them, but I was able to say counter that by when I built them, I did make quite a bit of money,
Right.
which is unusual. So,
But the market was turning, and then the interest rates were so high. I mean, listen.
well, yeah, no, I
You
mean,
did great.
yes,
compared to
right. I'm not saying that like I screwed up, because in fact I lucked out just for the reason Larry said, but because I already had the money, and then if I had to dole it back out,
Right.
I had to dole it back out.
Wow.
So, but you mentioned the RTC, and I don't, maybe are we?
Yeah. Let's spend a couple minutes on that.
All
We'll
right.
wrap up in a few minutes, but let's spend a couple minutes on that.
So, after the interest rates went to the sky, and
Now, RTC, that was the government
Resolution Trust Corporation.
Resolution Trust Corp,
Right.
which had to dispose of all the big foreclosures, big projects.
Well, yeah, because all the savings and loans and all these REITs went broke, and so now this was the second time. This wasn't, when I was in my 30s when we did the breakers. This was in the
like
80s.
In the late 80s or something?
Yeah, this was after Reagan, because of those high interest rates, and that caused a lot of problems. So I went to that. Well, let me tell you this one first. I'm sorry, I forgot about this. So I play a lot of poker. I play in tournaments. I play in the World Series.
You've played in the World Series. You played with Telly Savalas, right?
Yeah, I have, as a matter of fact. That was a long time ago. But so Foxwoods opened in Connecticut, which is an Indian casino, and at that time it was probably one of the few casinos on the East Coast. So I would go up there and play poker Now the problem with me is that I'm a stud player, not a hold'em player. So now everybody plays hold'em, so I don't really play that much poker. But back then I did. So anyway, I'm up there one time, and I see that they're going to be holding this RTC auction. And, what do I know about Connecticut? But I saw that they had these 3 6-unit buildings, or, different buildings, different places. Right. Well, let's say multifamily. So listen, you can't play poker all day and all night. So, one day I said, well, let me go look at these. So, I went around and looked at them. 2 were awful. But I go into the third one. Now, it's not in the greatest neighborhood. The only thing it had going for it was literally across the street. And I'm quoting what they got on the sign. Across the street from the oldest house in the United States.
The oldest house in the U.S.
I swear, yeah. Now, and it wasn't a great area. So I go into this building, and there was a postman who was still living there. He wasn't paying rent, but he was living there, and he was a nice guy. So he let me, I went in. Now, what the difference there is from the outside, it really didn't look good.
Right.
But whoever lost the property had fixed up 5 of the 6 units.
Right.
They were beautiful. Now, the last unit really needed a lot of work, but the other 5, you could move people in right away.
They're move-in ready.
Yeah. So I said, wow, this is interesting. So I go to the auction, and mostly it was resident. Mostly it was, single family homes, and
right.
And then these 3.
Right.
And the one I was interested in was the last one. In other words, they were in order, they've been on order. So, there was 32, 33, and 34.
Yeah.
So the one I was interested in was 34. So here we go. Now by this time, don't forget, okay, after the auction at Breakers West, I said to myself, this is amazing, So I went to the Harvard of auction schools. It's called Missouri Auction School. I spent 2 weeks out there. I had an auctioneer's license. I was licensed in Florida. I was licensed in North Carolina. I never used it or never did anything with it, but it was a good experience.
Right.
So I knew a little bit about auctions where most people don't. So the auction starts, and what they do is if you won, you had to leave, you had to go in a line, like to get processed.
Right.
So now, all this, they do all the single family, they're down to these three things. So the first one goes, and some guy bids, I don't know, 50,000, gets it. Next one is 45,000, gets it. Now don't forget, okay, so now the next one comes up, and I'm bidding, because I want this one. You looked at it. This is the one I wanted. So I wound up getting it for $18,000.
For how much?
$18,000. So
and it was the best one.
Yeah, what by far. But here's why. But here's the problem. So after, so I wound up getting in the line too. So the other two guys in front of me who were in that, they said, wow, we were going to bid on that one. We couldn't because we were stuck in the line.
Right.
So what I'm getting at is that, they were actually pulled out of the auction, so there was nobody really bidding against me. Because
they weren't in front of there. Well, they were in line already.
And there was this one real estate broker who that was sitting behind me. And I think, and this is something, and I wanted to show, okay, so I think we were at 12. And he goes 13. And I go 14. And then he goes 15. And then so now you want to show him that you want strong. This property. And then I went 18.
So you went from 15 to 18.
Exactly.
To let him know.
And I turned around, because he was right behind me. I turned around and I looked at him. And I didn't say anything, but he knew I wanted it.
Right.
And he said, I might get in trouble here. I might pay too much,
Right.
And he just shut down, and I got it for the 18. But and then I wound up, and then I rented it out. But I bought it because it was a good deal. But I was going up there maybe once every 3 months or so. So anyway,
you didn't want to be a landlord from Florida in Connecticut, right?
No. So anyway, so we closed it with this attorney, and then I rented it up. I got some people in the units, and then about 6 months later, he calls me, and he wanted to buy it. So I sold it to him for $95,000.
$95,000.
I think I took paper too.
Yeah, you carried the paper.
Yeah, and
I remember that deal. I remember exactly when you did that deal, because I remember talking about that.
And that's something else, just in passing, I'd like to point out, in the sense that, and if you can, a lot of times you just can't, but you always get more money if you're able to do the financing. I mean, that's, that would be
like my Filthy Riches model.
Yeah. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, if you're able to carry the paper for a while, you're going to get a better price, and your money's still working to some degree. I mean, it's not like you're doing hard money loans in the sense that your focus there is not to see how much interest you can get. Your focus is to sell the property. So if you can get a little more money by selling it and carrying the paper, and it's okay, there's nothing wrong with it. Plus, it'll help you sell it faster if you have financing.
That's awesome. That's really good. Yeah. I really, really appreciate you doing this. This is awesome. So what kind of advice would you give somebody? I mean, you've been doing this for many years. You were my mentor. I don't ever do a big deal without calling you, asking your advice. And
thank you, Larry.
And you're never hesitant about giving it.
No.
I mean, sometimes you bust my chops about doing something.
Oh yeah.
And I know it's because you love me.
Exactly.
Exactly. But I never do a big deal without asking you and asking your advice, because you've been there, done that. Well, so what advice would you give to somebody?
I remember when I was when Dawn was sick, and Mommy was up here most of the time.
Yeah.
One day she calls me and she says, "Larry's looking at this deal." And I said, "Oh yeah, where is it?" She says, "It's on 274. It's a bunch of metal buildings. They won $700,000 for it." I said, "Oh no." So anyway, so finally Larry called me, and I said, "Larry, are you sure?" And
I sent you some videos of it.
Yeah, and I said, $700,000. So anyway, to make a long story short, he didn't buy that, which was good. And
and you talked me out of it.
I did.
I wanted to buy the building.
I know.
But luckily, I got this one for less money, and it's a 9,000 square foot building, and it's already set up for offices.
There's no comparison. I mean, this is on the main drag. This is on, so anyway, you just got to be patient, and there was another deal that was during the auctions that he almost got, but you got to be fast too. And, if you see a good deal, you either got to.
You can't steal in slow motion.
No, exactly. I like that. Yeah, no, you can't steal in slow motion. So, but anyway, yes. And I'm always there for you.
Yeah.
But okay, to answer your question, my best advice starting out would be to get a mentor. And that's what I did in effect. Joe taught me a lot,
Joe and Joe Nell.
Yeah, and Joe Nell too. But Joe Nell was more of a broker, and I really never. Yeah, I have brokered deals and made quite a bit of money, as a broker. But I was always more of a principal, or
right.
And if I looked at a deal, I was. I could never be a broker because when I looked at a deal, it was either that I wanted it or I didn't want it. So, right. and so it just
that makes sense.
And I was good at it in the sense that even going back to when I was selling those condos, I know how to sell, but I prefer more action than that, or being in the middle.
Right. But she was a great broker. She was involved in putting together the Disney property.
Yes. No, she was. And even in Miami, she was, very, very well known. And, she was doing a lot of orange groves throughout the state.
Yeah.
She did farmland and commercial.
Yeah.
You name it.
That's good.
But, so.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's awesome. I've been wanting to do it for a long time.
I know.
I really have. And the time came up. I'm not letting you leave here without doing this. And I know you guys got a lot out of it. Thanks a lot for watching.
Thank you, Larry.